All right, welcome everyone. Holding by the Book of Leviticus chapter 16, verse 1. Again, want to welcome everyone. Holding by the Book of Leviticus chapter 16, verse 1. Still delving in to the sin of Nadav and Avihu and why the two sons of Aaron died. So hopefully, at least we're going to finish up the first verse here. We're in the middle of what my Rebbe here was talking about. And says my Rebbe, Arav Agon Moshe Shlita should be well. And he brings down in his commentary on Chumash and Tam V'das. And he brings down Rashi over here. And he explains that, what did Rashi say? That Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah used the mashal, used the parable to explain the death of the two sons of Aaron Agoin. Right? The parable was of a sick person who goes to a doctor. Doctor tells him, don't eat anything cold things or don't lie in cold things. And then the doctor says to someone else, don't eat these cold things or lie in cold, in damp things so you don't die like so-and-so died. So what do we learn out? Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says that the second one, the doctor warns more fastidious, right? It's a greater warning than the first one. Because the first one's only told, don't do this. Right? Second one comes and says, don't do this lest you die like so-and-so. That's more severe. And that's why it says, after the death of the two sons of Aaron. So we mentioned issues with that. We went through the Or Chaim HaKadosh for a number of weeks, explaining, some of the issues, with this medrash. Regardless, my Rebbe says over here, if a person, let's say here's a story. Here's a story of a great person, of a great rabbi, let's say. And the story itself is great benefit. Why? Because people can be inspired. There are stories of, great rabbis that are written by Art Scroll. And some people have issues with it because we see how great these people are, almost like they're born great, right? In many ways. So people say, why should I read them? Gives me what we say, Chalishas Adas. What's Chalishas Adas? Right? It makes me feel despondent. How am I going to ever reach that level? It's impossible to reach that level. Look how great these people are. How can I ever reach such a level? So he says sometimes a person will hear stories about great rabbis, tzaddikim. It's a benefit. There's a tremendous benefit just by saying it over. So again, some may say, you're right, there's benefits. But sometimes there are levels we can't relate to. Very hard. Very hard to relate to somebody who's way up here and we're way down here. Now, that's even in this generation. Not talking about previous generations. Previous generations, the generations go very quickly. So, in previous generations, we don't compare to anything. As the Gemara says, if, by previous generation, we're like ants compared to them. We're like grass that gets stomped on or whatever. Right? And we don't compare. I'll just give an example. I'll give one example. I mean, there are many multiple examples. I'll give one. So in the yeshiva of Baranovich, Rabbi Chanan Wassman, Hashem Yikam Damoy, God should avenge his blood. He had a yeshiva in Baranovich. Now, the yeshiva took students, 13, 14, 15, right? Part of the entry exam, and every yeshiva has an entry exam. Certain piece of Gemara that they have to learn, and they're going to be asked questions on it. Maybe the early commentators, later commentators, other things. They want to see if the kid really knows how to learn. In Rabbi Hanan's yeshiva, they had to know 200 pages front and back, 400 pages of Talmud. That was the prerequisite. They think 400 pages of Talmud. Let's say it took, 2 or 3 tractates. You take, 2 or 3 tractates or more. That in order to get into that yeshiva, you have to know backwards and forwards. Now, how many people today would pass such a test? There are people that would. Not at that age. Unless the person is an absolute child prodigy. Right? But most people are not going to pass that test today. Because we're in a much lower generation. So you're going to say, come on, that's like 500 years ago. How can we compare to 500 years ago? Wasn't 500 years ago. Less than 100 years ago. Less than 100 years ago. 70 years. Right? I mean, Baranovich got destroyed during the war. Talking 70 years. 80 years. Give or take. Imagine what these kids had to know. Imagine the generation we lost in Europe. What these kids could have been. So that's only the last generation. You want to go back 200 years, 250 years to the Vilna Gaon, Rav Elijah Vilna. Different world. Totally different world. Even before that, you want to go to the Chazon Ish, Rav Avram Yishai Karol with the blessed memory, the Brisker Rav Yisrael Zev Soloveitchik, a blessed memory, Rav Eli Lopian, Rav Dessler. Right? That's the previous generation. My Rebbe had contact with all of them. So, can't imagine my Rebbe, you can't imagine who they are. Now go back 200 years. We have a connection to how righteous these people were and what they knew. Give one example by the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon's soul was so great. He would have been great even time of Rashi or the Rambam. Someone asked Rav Chaim of Volozhin. Chaim of Volozhin is a famous student, and he wrote Nefesh HaChaim and was the head of the yeshiva in Volozhin. And someone asked him the following question. They said, what's the difference between your brother and the Vilna Gaon? His brother was also a genius. Rav Chaim of Volozhin's brother. Unbelievable genius as well. So Rav Chaim of Volozhin said, I'll tell you the difference. My brother could tell you verbatim the Talmud from beginning to end. That's how well he knew it. That's how well versed he was. He says the Vilna Gaon could tell it to you backwards. We can't imagine. 100% we can't imagine what that means. One thing you tell me, okay, someone knows from the beginning of a tractate to the end. He knows every word, every chapter, going forward. Isn't there a major difference? Someone knows it backwards. So we don't compare. Who are we to compare? We're not even compared to ants. We're not even ants compared to them. So then you tell stories. Even in the last generation. Right? I'll make it relatively easy. Even in the last generation. We understand who these people were. Mary tells stories of the Brisker Rav, a blessed memory. Everything he did was calculated. Calculated. Did he put too much effort in? Right? Did he have, did he not have enough faith in God by doing certain things? Everything was calculated. Everything he said was calculated. Controlled his thoughts was calculated. Very hard to meet such people today. It's a different generation. I'm not saying we don't have great rabbis today. Right? So we hear great stories or inspiring stories. See, it's a double-edged sword over here. Why? On the one hand, we get tremendously inspired. Look what a person can reach. Look what level they reached. the high level they reached. We get inspired by such a thing because the great benefits. You see what people can do through learning Torah, through working on character traits. Rabbi Chanan said about himself that he was a famous student, one of the famous students of Chofetz Chaim, of a blessed memory. And Rabbi Chanan said about himself that he only had average intelligence. So how did he become so great? How did he become one of the Torah giants of the generation? So he became so great, he admitted on himself, it was only because of constant learning. Constant learning, constant review. Now, does it help to have 120 IQ? Yeah, it does. Does it help to have a photographic memory? Yeah. Does it, there are a lot of things that help. But, if a person can be challenged, they can, in this case, you're going to say, what could ever become of somebody? Look at how, look at their lack of intelligence. People said that about Einstein. Well, I have to make a big distinction over here. Einstein wasting time, his mind's in the clouds and different things. He thought he was a loser, never going to amount to anything. He's a daydreamer, right? Okay, so he didn't really amount to anything in Torah. That's a given. You can say, well, what he did in science, fine. Right? But people make mistakes. They look at someone and they'll sum them up by, what they say, how they act, different things. So here, he said on himself. He only had average intelligence. How can someone, even less average intelligence, I'm not saying they're mentally challenged. Let's not go that far. Someone's got average intelligence. Average intelligence. How far can average intelligence take you? Depends. Depends how much effort you put in. There are people that can be absolute geniuses. They don't work hard. They're lazy. They rest on their laurels, so to speak. You take someone of average intelligence who works and grinds and grinds and grinds, they get somewhere. I'm not saying someone who's a genius is not going to get anywhere, but he doesn't have to work that hard. So the bar for him is much greater, much, much greater. But to take someone of average intelligence, let's say, but they work very hard day in and day out, and they're diligent, and they review, and they're constantly going over this way, that way, the other way. It's a different world. Totally different world. Doesn't matter what their intelligence is. Irrelevant what their intelligence is. God can open up their minds. Right? God can expand their mind to the extent they become great because God helped them. Because according to nature, maybe they shouldn't have been so great in general when it comes to Torah. So, Bible here says you tell stories, and that's really the custom. A person has a fourth meal on Shabbos, right? Meaning Saturday night. They should tell over stories of righteous people. I remember I was up north once for Shabbos, so they wanted me to speak between the third meal, right, or by the third meal. So, there are a lot of Hasidim there, as well. So, said something about the Parsha, and then I started telling stories about my Rebbe, different things. Something that he brought down, I told this story, the other story. So I said, come on, this isn't fitting for the third meal. I should be here after Shabbos, right? I should be telling these stories after Shabbos. But there's the benefit. What's the benefit? The benefit is you see what a person can be. How much they can grow. Right? So, okay, my Rebbe's previous generation should be well. Right? Well into his mid-90s. Should be well. So that's the previous generation. But guess what? With everything that he knows and everything that he's done, all the great people he met in previous generations, the Brisker Rav Dessler, Rav Elio Pian, the Chazon Ish, the Stipler, Rav Chaim Kanievsky's father, the Satmar Rebbe, all the Rebbes he had contact with, the Gera Rebbes. He had contact with everyone. The Shabbat Rav, the other person he had great contact with. He was once telling me, I was taking him somewhere, I was stopped at a red light. He's telling me all these great people that he had a connection to. Rabbi Chanan, Shem Yikam Damo, he saw Rabbi Chanan as a child, as a young child, etc. He's going through all these different, great rabbinic authorities of the previous generation. And he looked at me and he goes, look, I even know you. I said, the Rav even knows me. He goes, yeah, I even know you. So look at that. Hobnobbing with the best. Not even comparison. Not even a comparison. But him compared to them. Nothing. It's people we can't imagine who they are. That's only the previous generation. You want to go back, before that, 150 years, 300 years, 500 years. You want to go to Rashi, the Rambam, the Ramban? Come on, who do we compare to them? We're nothing compared to them. So you got to say, you tell a story, about the Vilna Gaon, Rav Chaim Brisker, any of these great people, the previous generations. How do I relate to that? How can a person relate to that? A person's going to say, I'll never reach that in 10 lifetimes. Probably true. Depends the source of our soul, but yeah, it's probably true. Probably very true. So a person can say, what's the point? Why would you tell such a story? Let's say better. Why would you tell such stories? Because in the end, what's going to come out of it? A person's going to say, wow, very nice story. Very inspirational. What does that have to do with me? We can get inspired no matter where we're holding. Doesn't matter where we're holding. You can always get inspired. Question is what we do with the inspiration. Do we take the inspiration and run with it, or we just say, wow, that's so nice, but I'll never reach that. That'll never happen. I grew up in a different generation. Totally different generation. And they also had yichus. They had a pedigree. A lot of them had great families, great rabbis they were connected to. We're starting at the bottom. Similarly at the bottom. Right? But by Jews today, everyone's got a grandfather, great-grandfather, somewhere down the line that were great people, great spiritual people, great grandfathers, great grandmothers, whatever. Down the line, it just got watered down. Right? So the Jewish people have a pedigree, have a tremendous pedigree. Doesn't mean we always use it. Right? His mother, blessed memory, would say, you know what yichus is? Yichus means it's like, genealogy, pedigree. She said, you know what yichus is worth? Just another zero. Just add another zero. Right? But imagine if little old us, we would have grown up with cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents that were going in the way of Torah mitzvahs. Wouldn't we look different today? We look different today. I don't think there's any question, because there should be hopefully a positive influence that they would have. Does that guarantee that we're going to turn out the way we should? No. Doesn't guarantee that. Doesn't guarantee that at all. It helps. It just makes you now, as my Rebbe's mother would say, you're more responsible. You have greater responsibility to live up to fill those shoes. Those are big shoes to fill. Very well could be. But at the end of the day, what did King David say? Mentions many times. We'll keep mentioning it. King David says in Psalms, we're here for 70 years. If we have strength, 80 years. Fame, right? Someone thinks it's going to live forever. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. So we're here for a short amount of time. And the problem is, we mentioned many times as well, we waste time. A lot of time. And if we really saw how much time we wasted, that would scare the tickets out of everybody. Myself included. Scare the wits out of us. Because you're going to say, a person get upstairs and God say, hey, how come you didn't learn as much? So what do you mean? God's going to show you all those times. Look what you did over here. Look what you did this time. That time, you could have been learning. The Jerusalem Talmud says, this is by men, we're not going to apply this to women because women don't have an obligation to learn, but they have an obligation to learn what they, certainly what they need to know. Laws of Shabbos, kashrus, other things. But the Jerusalem Talmud says God's willing to look the other way even on the three cardinal sins, i.e. murder, idolatry, and immorality. In other words, those are three cardinal sins every Jew has to give up their life for, anytime, any place. So if a non-Jew, or Jew for that matter, put a gun to a person's head and say, I want you to bow down to this guy in the stick, right? A reference to JC. Or shoot with a fat guy, Mr. Buddha himself, right? We can make fun of idolatry. Say, hey, bow down to Fatso over here. They probably won't say that. But they bow down to Fatso or die. 100% you have to be willing to die anytime, any place. These three cardinal sins, there's an obligation for a Jew to sanctify God's name. 100%. Anytime, any place does not apply to a non-Jew. If a non-Jew wanted to, they can bow down. Right? They don't have to give up their life over here. Right? They have to see, if across the board we say that, or maybe not. Doesn't really matter. Right? But the point is, God, what does the Jerusalem Talmud tell me? Jerusalem Talmud says that God's going to look the other way of all these three cardinal sins. But one thing he's not going to look the other way for. What's he not going to look the other way for? When a person had the opportunity to learn and he didn't. That is a scary proposition. The floods, the generation of the flood. What were they destroyed by? What was the final stamp that killed them? Stealing. What does that mean? They didn't transgress other things, right? The big three, of course they transgressed. Commentaries say. So why is the seal on stealing? Because if people steal and not going to be liable, the world can't exist. The world won't be able to exist. Right? But there are other terrible things going on. So imagine God says, I'm willing to overlook a lot of things. Even the most vile things in my eyes. How many times the Torah speaks about immorality, about idolatry, right? Murder in different ways. Many, many, many times. God says, I'm willing to push all that aside. You waste time when you could have been learning. No. I'm not going to let that go. Because what did I put you in the world for? You're in this world to learn, to strive, to toil. I'm not interested in how much you know about sports, TV, entertainment, football, right? All these things. Waste of time. 100% waste of time. And we're going to have to answer for that. Totally going to have to answer. Someone's going to say, come on, does God expect us to be machines? Does God expect us to be able to learn, 24/7 and just keep going? No. Have to make a living. Got to put bread on the table. A lot of, family obligations. So there are times we're exempt from learning, right? Someone who works, the only permissibility to work is when you're not working, you should be learning. A couple hours here, whatever a person can learn, however much time they have. But if a person, even in that sense, they were doing, too much for work, that, I got to do this sale, got to do this, do that. And really, they went too far. And they really didn't have to do that. So what happens? They're going to get punished. They're going to say, what are you talking about? Why should I get punished over here? I'm doing it to make a living. What's God going to show them? No, this was extra. This you didn't need to do. You might have thought you needed to do it. You were wrong. You were wrong over here. But without even getting into all that, a person's got an obligation to learn. The person's going to say, I'm tired, I'm this, I'm that. We can make excuses. Question is, does the excuse stick? I'm not going to say it's easy. I've had people say, you just sit and learn all day. You want to try and learn 12 hours a day. 10 hours a day. Your brain hurts. Torah, the Gemara says, weakens a person. You think it's so easy? Someone's going to say, come on. You think being a lawyer is easy? You think being a doctor is easy? I'm not saying it is. I'm not claiming that. Right? That's a different kind of being tired. Right? Using your mind, whatever. Not the same. Not exactly the same. But when someone's sitting and learning, they're opening up their minds, so to speak, to God's world. It takes efforts. We got to understand what it says. We got to put ourselves into it. It's hard to learn, even though there are certain things that go according to the way we think. I.e., let's say the laws of damages. We'll make it easy. Laws of business. There are things we can understand, right? That makes sense to us. Totally makes sense. But you know what? When we learn it and we see the Torah spin on things, what do we say? We say, what's going on here? According to business, it should be like this and like this. Oh, the Torah says no. Give an example. There's a Torah prohibition for a Jew to lend money to another Jew with interest. Torah prohibition. So the Mishnah Bava Metzia says that someone writes contracts. Let's say Reuven lends Shimon $100, and Shimon agrees to pay back $120. Person who Reuven, Shimon, the one who wrote up the document, the one who signed on the document, they all transgress. They all transgress. You tell me you got witnesses there. They didn't loan the money. They don't loan the money with interest, no, but they're giving their stamp of approval. They're saying it's okay. But you see, when it comes to the laws of ribbas, charging with interest, isn't it the way of the world? You go to a bank. You want to borrow money, buy a house or whatever, fine. They'll say, we'll give you $20,000. We'll give you $50,000, but you're going to pay back more. That's the way of the world. That's exactly what the Gemara says. That's the way of the world. But you know what? Torah says you know how to do it. For a Jew, can I lend a non-Jew money with interest? Yeah. Can they lend me with interest? Yeah. Can a Jew do it to a Jew? No. Now, someone would ask the $1 million question or $1.5 million question. We're upping the ante here. They could ask the $1.5 million question. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense at all. Why would I think such a thing? And the answer is we wouldn't. As the Gemara says, this is something that's done on a daily basis. This is a common thing. So if it's a common thing, why is it forbidden? Because Torah says you're not allowed to do it. See, a fellow Jew, you're not allowed to do it. You should show mercy. But I'm not getting any benefit from my money. Let my money make a little bit of interest. We all want money to make interest. So let it make a little bit of interest. Torah says not allowed to. Torah says 100% forbidden. Not allowed to do it. Not only that. Let's make it real graphic. Not only is it forbidden, not only is it a Torah prohibition, a person who lends with ribbis doesn't repent. Right? They lend with interest. A Jew to a fellow Jew, they don't get up a resurrection. Unless they repent before. Now, we could come at different angles, try and explain this. But this is a natural thing that happens on a daily basis. This is something you would say, this doesn't make any sense at all according to the Torah. But the Torah tells me I'm not allowed to do it, but it's such a severe prohibition. Tremendously severe. There are other things in the laws of damages. I would think otherwise. Now remember, the Gemara says if a person wants to become wise, you should learn the laws of damage. It's complex. Very, very complex. So I remember learning something and I'm just having trouble making sense, head to tails of what the thing was talking about, what the Talmud was talking about. So, as one of my rabbis once, I said, I understand. These are the laws of damages. If it's the closest thing to our own understanding, why is it so hard? If you tell me it's all about purity and impurity, spiritual cooties, as I would call it, or you're talking about sacrifices, we don't have connection to that, and maybe some other things, I can understand. Then I can understand we don't have a connection. So it's harder for us to fathom, to put our mind into what it is and to go through all the different rules and all that. That I can understand. Laws of damages, business. Why should that be so hard? Why should that be so hard? Try and figure out. It's a common thing. So one of my rabbis explained, you're missing one vital element. You're missing one vital element over here. You know what the vital element is? You're forgetting it's God-given. You're forgetting the Torah is God-given. Oh, but the laws of business. And they're all Torah prohibitions, most of them. Person, doesn't act in business properly, probably transgress the Torah prohibition. Laws of Shabbos, mostly rabbinical. Laws of kashrut is mostly rabbinical. Laws of damages business. Yeah, these are serious things. So you got to tell me, okay? But it's complex. Extremely complex. So I would say, and which I did say, and that is, how can it be that's so hard? How can they, I once had a question. I was learning something. I had a question, and I didn't see anyone who asked the question. Normally, if you don't see any of the commentaries that ask a question, as King Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, Ein davar chadash tachas hashemesh. Nothing new under the sun. So it's probably not a question you haven't thought of, that the rabbis haven't thought of, right? So, in all generations. So if you don't see the question being asked, most likely it's probably not a question. Probably someone asked it or someone discarded it or whatever. So I had a question. I didn't see anyone ask it. I was looking around. Finally, one of the commentaries of the Code of Jewish Law, in the Shulchan Aruch, I saw one of the commentaries, boom, right there, black and white. Black and white, asked my question. Or let me say better, I asked this question. So I was like dancing, like, oh, tremendous, finally. I saw someone who asked the question. But guess what? There are like 6 different variables in the question itself. I was only thinking, I don't even know, I was thinking more than one variable. At least I had the question. I saw it was a legitimate question. But then I had, one of the things I did when I was learning, in a certain place, every so often, we had to present something to everybody else. Present something that we learned and go through it, and they would try and, as they say in Yiddish, upschlag you. They would try and, find contradictions, see what you were saying is true. It was a big test. You're giving over something that the Gemara says. You bring down the commentaries, this, that, and, and they're allowed to ask questions, and all that. Right? So here I said, okay, this is what I'll speak about. And the more I delved into it, I'm like, you got to be kidding. This is a heck of a lot more complex than I thought. Heck of a lot more complex. I only saw it on one side, or maybe 2 sides if I was lucky. Then I saw someone else brought something else up, and this and that. It was like 6 different points. But this is the laws of damages, laws of business. So it's something we understand. It's something that goes to our own understanding. But you have to remember the big X factor. I'm going to call it the big X factor. Who's the big X factor? That's God himself. And when God gave the Torah multiple levels, multiple levels. Someone are asking, did you borrow money to a non-Jew with interest in the form of a contract? Yes, not a problem. Even without a contract, right? Having a contract is better. Having a witness is better, because what does the witness do? They're going to sign on it and say, if this person welches and can't pay it, they agree to pay it. That's why anyone who ever borrows money, they normally want 2 people to sign. And that if you can't pay, God forbid, someone else will pay. At least there's a guarantee, hopefully, that the person who lent the money, they're going to get the money back, right? So what do we see? Torah is extremely complex. So you're going to say, well, you didn't need me to tell you that. You're right. But if it's something that makes sense according to our own understanding, totally our own understanding, and you're going to say in a lot of sense, I used to say when I was in college, a lot of sense it doesn't make. So you say a lot of sense it doesn't make, but come on. This is the closest thing to our own understanding. So what are you going to say about the rest of the Torah? What are you going to say about sacrifices? What are you going to say about, purity and impurity law? Spiritual cooties, as I would call it. What are you going to say about all these other things that really are divine decree that we don't really fully understand, even though we have to delve into it? But this is something we understand. This is something that's closest to our brain cells, that makes the most sense logically. You know what we have to do? We have to throw out what we think is logic. That's what we have to do. When we learn, whatever we learn, we have to take in what the Torah says and understand the concepts. And put that in our brains and say, I don't get it. The rest of the, just like by loaning with interest, everyone will say that's the way of the world. Everybody does it. So what's the problem? You know what the problem is? The Torah says you can't do it. Number of verses, very, very severe. It's so severe, we mentioned before. You don't get up at resurrection of the dead, period. Unless you repent. Now, most people would probably think, why, that shouldn't be so severe. So what's the big deal? I lent $150 to somebody, or whatever the case is. I told them they have to pay me back $200. They agree. Two consenting adults, not a problem. You write a contract. You don't write a contract. Doesn't matter. You agree. Right? Better to write a contract because then the guy can say, I never borrow money from you. Then what are you going to use as witnesses? That's a problem. Right? Always better to write it down in a contract. And maybe someone once told me, he said, if you ever borrow money, always spell out how much you borrowed. Right? In other words, even if you borrowed in, let's say you borrowed in dollars. Right? A lot of people here borrow in dollars, not necessarily in shekels. Sometimes either way, it doesn't really matter. Right? But the point is, if you say I borrowed, Joe borrowed, Ruvain borrowed from Shimon, $500, you write $500 US. You write it out, not just the numbers. Why? But my Rebbe's son told me once, someone came and based it in the rabbinical court, and someone borrowed money from someone. They didn't spell it out. They just said, borrow $500, $1,000. And what the person do? They added an extra zero. A Jew, an Orthodox Jew, right? Or an Orthodox Jew, what did he do? He skimmed off his friend. So instead of saying he borrowed $1,000, since he didn't spell it out, he just added an extra zero. He says, what do you mean? He said, I paid, he said, I paid it back. I said, no, you didn't. I got the shtar. I got the document right here. And the document says you owe me $10,000. What are you talking about? It was only for $1,000. Now, the one who borrowed $1,000 is going to have to come up with a pretty good proof why it's not $10,000. And he's going to have to show why this document has been played around with. He's going to have to prove that. Now, if it's written out and he only wrote out $1,000, but the other person put in whiteouts, people still use whiteout today. They put in whiteouts and they put in 10,000 and they wrote it in a different, in a different font, the way they wrote it than the other person. That's easy to prove. That's very easy to prove. But see, people can do all kinds of things today. Certainly on a computer, they can make up all kinds of things. Unbelievable. I mean, I'm not going to say for the good. Could be also for the good, right? But you can doctor things. That was what I was thinking of. You can doctor things, doctor documents, right? This is something that happened. It happened in real time. The Rebbe's son said, you ever borrow money, you spell it out. You borrowed $500, you spell out $500 US dollars. Or 500 shekels, 5,000 shekels, whatever it is. You spell it out to make sure you never have this problem. Good advice. But you would think, come on, is someone really going to do that? Happened. Just give another example while I'm on that. The first 3 volumes, question and answers that my Rebbe put out were all questions that he had in South Africa. Right? When he was in South Africa. Way out questions. That you would think, come on. Did you make these up yourself? Like, you just thought of this question, you wrote it down. These are like mostly questions that he got. It was in South Africa. Like he told me the following story. A woman comes to him when he was in South Africa. He says, she's very religious, much more religious than you'll ever be in 10 lifetimes. I said, okay. I said, so what's the question? She wants to sell her chametz before Passover. She wants to sell all her 11 products. A common thing. You come to the rabbi before Passover. You fill out this document, whatever, you give it to him and he sells. You give him permission to sell your chametz. Okay, very good. So I said, so what's the question? I said, I could have even answered that. What's the question? He goes, So my Rebbe said she wanted to sell the chametz to her husband. So I said, oh, by a technicality, she happens to be married to a non-Jew. Just a technicality. But he told me, listen, she's very, very religious. I said, oh, but she's really married to a non-Jew. I'm glad you get these questions and not me. So whatever, we had a whole discussion, about it. But, without even going into all that, it's a crazy question. It's a crazy question to ask, in a certain way. I'm not saying the person's crazy. It's a strange question. I mean, I knew of a story, and probably many stories like this, of someone who's married. Let's make it easy. A Jew married to a Jew. And while they're married, one of them has an epiphany. They decide to become religious. The other one doesn't. So there are issues. One spouse doesn't want to have a sukkah. And if it's a woman, it's even worse. Right? Let's say there's a story with Ori Zohar. Rabbi Ori Zohar. Anyone has ever read his book? My Friends, We've Been Robbed. He's a famous Israeli actor, and he became religious, 30 years ago, more. Right? He's probably the quintessential Baal Tshuva returning to Judaism, for Israelis. And he became religious. The whole story, I don't want to necessarily go into it, but anyway, he became religious, or is becoming religious, and his wife won't have nothing to do with it. Nothing. You won't have anything to do with it. You want to keep Shabbos? Keep Shabbos. I'm going out. I'm doing this. I'm doing, you want to do this? Fine. But there's a problem. She can't just say live and let live. Why? There's a major problem here. We're going to keep this PG-13. She has to keep family purity laws, right? If she's a Jew, she has to go to the mikveh. And she said, I'm not doing that. There's no way I'm doing that. Not, in my language, not a snowball's chance in hell. You're going to get me to do that. Forget it. Not going to happen. You might as well marry someone else. Now, that's a serious problem. That's a very serious problem. It's not about live and let live. You can't have two separate standards. So I'll let him do whatever he wants. So what about the kitchen? What about trying to keep Shabbos when TV's blasting? Right? That's why someone who converts, if they're with somebody they're married or whatever, they have to be on the same page. I got this question. I answered the question to somebody, never heard from them again. Why? Because what did they ask? I said, I'm with somebody. He wants to convert. I have no interest in converting. I'll let him do whatever he wants. I said, that's great. But that doesn't butter the biscuit here. It's not going to help. You have to be on the same page. Why? Why do I have to be on the same page? Because you can't have people living two different styles. And especially this. This is a huge issue. Huge issue. In chapter 15, we spoke about this at length. Go back to all the videos, spoke about it. About family purity laws and the severity. If a person's with their spouse, they didn't go to the mikveh, etc. It's serious prohibition. Very, very serious prohibition. Even if it's not bleeding, doesn't matter. You're not allowed to have contact, you're not allowed to have, you're not allowed to touch, different things. There are very serious prohibition here. So what happened with Rabbi Ori Zohar? So I went to his Rebbe, Rabbi Zilberman, a blessed memory. Rabbi Zilberman told him, he said, she'll come around. Give her time. You got to give her a certain amount of time. You just put this on top of her, right? Of course she's going to be hesitant. Of course she's not going to want to do it, right? But you got to cut her some slack. So what happens? So over time, she ends up going on the same path also. But if she would not have gone on the same path, serious problem. Now, even if she didn't keep very many mitzvahs, but in this case, she would agree to go to the mikveh, that's a huge thing. Or then what about if she cooks on the Sabbath? There are other things that are problematic, not just that. I mean, I think that would be one of the most severe prohibitions. Not to mention if she doesn't want to keep kosher. And then she messed up the whole kitchen. Or you give her own portion in the kitchen. I mean, these are real problems. These can be real problems. So, there are stories of people that, let's say they grew up religious and they have a crisis. They have a midlife crisis, let's say. And what happened? They want to give up Judaism. They just want to do what they want to do. They're tired. They're burnt out. Let's say better. Now, what about the kids? What about the spouse? Can you stay married to such a person? What level? I heard a story. Somebody that has a son, married for a number of years, and he just said, "I'm done with this." He's like walked out on his wife. I think that was the story. He became not religious. It wasn't anything major. He had a crisis of faith. He wanted to live a hefker life. Wanted to live an ownerless life. Wanted to do whatever he wants. I'm not going to say that's real common. It happens. Why it happens, that's a whole discussion. I sort of spoke about that last night in my class in Pirkei Avos. Right? It can happen because a person, just very simply, doesn't internalize the message. And when we say we say every morning, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha, and I thought about this morning, you should think about it every morning. No matter what goes on in your life, you got to serve God with great joy. You got to serve him with great joy, even if it's hard. All right, and we spoke about that a lot also. Well, what's the idea? The idea is if you don't internalize the message, you're going to kick the king in the face eventually. It's what happened to Korach. The mission Pirkei Avos says in ethics for our fathers, says honor, desire, jealousy can take a person out of this world. Literally, some of the commentaries say. Korach was no fool. He survived Egypt. Right? He held the ark. And he didn't die. Carried the ark. Jealousy killed him. I want to be, the high priest. He didn't say I want to be the king. Moshe Rabbeinu was the king. If he said he wants to be the king, they'll kill him. I want this, I want that. Jealousy killed him. What happened to logic? By the Be'er Shem El Moshe Lemor. God spoke to Moshe saying, he didn't make anything up himself. It's what God told him. It's what everybody knew. But jealousy said no. Jealousy said, look, he's giving the high priesthood to his brother. He's giving it to his brother. You also have a pedigree. Look who's going to come out of you, Samuel the prophet. You're no slouch. And he believed it. Not only believed it, he convinced 250 great people with him. He took everybody down. Everybody down he took with him. How can it be? It's even worse. 10, 20, 50, a billion times worse, multiplied by infinity. Why? He saw God face to face at Mount Sinai. He survived Egypt. He saw the miracles. And he's coming out. I want to be the high priest. What are you, a 2-year-old? I want to be the high priest. I want to be on top. I want to be number one. That's not the way it works. That's not the way it works in God's world. God told Moshe what to tell him. That was it. Oh, favoritism, this, that. And this whole thing is, at the end of the book of Exodus, where you go through all the loops and the chains and the beams. We talk about the Mishkan, putting the Mishkan together. Moshe Rabbeinu has to give an accounting of every last thing. Commentaries tell us why. Want to make sure he didn't steal anything. Moshe Rabbeinu, the most humble of all people. Greatest person ever. Reached the 48th level of understanding. You want to tell me he's going to steal something from the Mishkan? Come on. But these are the people that survived that generation. The greatest generation in the history of man. So now we're going to say all the more so. You're going to say about that, what's it going to say about us? If you're going to talk about Korach and all the great things he did, and he got jealous, what's the parable here? Right? Let's say better. What's the point? The point is, if we don't internalize the message, we're no different than them. And they saw greater things than we saw. In many ways. Much greater things than we'll ever see. Are we ever going to see someone at Mount Sinai? No. We're not going to see that. We're not going to know what it's like to come out of Egypt be enslaved, see all the Egyptians die, see all the miracles, the manna in, that fell, the double portion came on Friday. We didn't see all that. So this is very, very hard to understand. Almost impossible at a basic level, any basic level, to understand. Because you're talking about people that we don't have a clue who they are. We don't have a clue. We can understand how bad jealousy is. We can see how far jealousy can take a person. And some of the commentaries say literally can take you out of this world, could kill you, totally kill you, destroy you. Jealousy destroys. Desire destroys. But you want to say, someone at Mount Sinai, someone who saw the miracles, yeah, but if you don't get the message, you don't understand, as Moshe Feinstein said of blessed memory in Parshas Korach. Moshe Feinstein, the Torah giants of the last generation of America, according to everybody, what does he say? He says, unbelievable, but Korach blew it. You know why he blew it? You know why he made a mistake? He made a mistake for one very simple reason. The mistake was he should have understood everything to divine decree. If he understands the divine decree, why would we ever sin? Ever. Why would we sin? We understand it's a divine decree. Doesn't mean a question. Doesn't mean I have to understand it. Right? We have, the Torah says in Exodus chapter 20, verse 1, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am the Lord your God. Right? I am the Lord your God, took you out of Egypt. Out of the house of bondage. Comes on the Minchas Chinuch. The Sefer Chinuch. One of the great early commentaries that goes parsha by parsha, going through all the mitzvahs. And he says that verse is the mitzvah to know God. How do we know God? Because he intervened in history. Commentaries ask, very good. So what happened to creation? Why do you say that God created the world? That's how I know God exists. One problem. Who was there? Who was there at creation? Nobody, right? Judaism is the only religion makes such a claim. 600,000 men between the ages of 20 and 30. Between the age of 20 and 60. Not including women and children. How many people is that? About 3 million, give or take. And both the Christians and the Muslims agree God gave us the Torah. They can tell me we're not chosen anymore. They can misinterpret the verses. They can do whatever they want. But no one ever makes such a claim. Christians make such a claim. Come on, Mr. Troll. Christians ever make such a claim that JC did in front of millions? No, I don't think so. Not according to my book. Never happened. Not in Christianity, not in Islam, not in Hinduism. All the miracles done in front of how many people? 2, 5, 8? Muhammad's flight from Mecca to Medina, who saw that? Millions? Never, not even close. So you can twist around the verses. You can say we're not chosen. You can bring all the proofs you want. Show me over here. Show me any religion, quote unquote, that makes such a claim except us. Nobody makes such a claim, period. Nobody makes such a claim. Right? But if they were at Mount Sinai, they saw that, how do I know? Oh, someone could ask, how do we know? How do we know that to be true? How do we know the Exodus really happens? Well, first of all, most of the known world would agree that's what happened. Regardless of whether we're chosen or not, it doesn't matter. But see, everyone's been to a Passover state, right? Every Jew's been to a Passover state. So how did they hear the story of the Exodus from Egypt? Parents told them. Father told them the story. Doesn't matter how watered down it was. Told them the story. Totally told them the story. And how does his father know the story? Because his father told him the story. How did his father know the story? Because his father told him the story. Now, if you have 4 generations in a Passover Seder, a great-grandfather, grandfather, father, and a son, so you got about a 70, 80-year difference between the oldest and the youngest. You take 40 of those generations, go back to Mount Sinai. It's not that many. Not that many. Right? So that being the case, we're the only ones to make such a claim. Totally, we're the only ones to make such a claim. Right? We're the only ones to make such a claim. I don't see anyone else making such a claim. Christians make such a claim? Don't think so. Muslims make such a claim? No. Hindus? No. Zoroastrians, no. There are 80,000 other religions. Anyone make such a claim? No. No one makes such a claim. Right? So what's the point? What's the point over here? So the point is that you could have someone so great, so unbelievably great, and they didn't get the message. They didn't internalize the message, even at his level, even what he saw on Mount Sinai. Totally what he saw on Mount Sinai. Because someone came to the Brisker Rav, and someone told the Brisker Rav the following. They said, had it been that God would reveal himself, people would do tshuva, people would come back to Judaism. Brisker Rav said, I beg to disagree. Because if God would show an open miracle right now, no one's jumping on the bandwagon. They're going to try and figure out how it's done, this, that. The only people that will really believe are people that are a vessel. People that are a vessel. They have to be a vessel to be able to accept spirituality upon themselves. If they're not a vessel for that, never going to happen. Even if God shows miracle after miracle. Right? So, Korach off the beaten track, so to speak. So a person can say, okay, you mentioned before, you can have 25-year-old, 30-year-old, picks up and leaves and says, I just want to live an ownerless life. Is it common? No. No, I'm going to say it's common. All right. The question is, how does it happen? How does it happen? And it happens because you don't get the message. You go through the motions. You're doing things by rote, which is akin to spiritual death. Akin to spiritual death. And we're here to struggle. We're here to toil. We're here to work hard. And we can't do things just by rote because I did it yesterday and we're going to do it tomorrow. And I did it the day before, right? And I did it, the week before and all that. Part of my Hasidic side here coming. I'm going to sing and dance a little bit, right? Totally got to sing, got to sing and dance a little bit. Someone asked, is the requirement to care for the poor and widow applicable to all people? Why not? Why shouldn't it be? In other words, if a person sees someone in distress and they can help them, let's say financially, they should. The logical thing. Do they have to give a tenth like a Jew? No. They give as much as they want. They want to give a 50th, 100th, whatever, they give what they can give. 100%, they can certainly help. What does it require? How does the person help a widow? You can help them financially. You can, and even if you can't help them financially, give them words of encouragement. You help them in other ways. Help them in their house. I don't know. There are all kinds of things, right? It's not just limited to money. Charity, even if a person can't give, it's not just limited to money. Charity can be, Ramosha Snyder, a blessed memory, my Rebbe's Rebbe, students in the yeshiva, they couldn't give charity. They didn't have any money, right? Obviously not making money. They're younger anyway, but they can't give charity. So what did he do? He instituted a program called Avodas HaKodesh. What is the program of Avodas HaKodesh? That the older students, 2 hours a week, would answer questions or difficulties that younger students had. And that was their form of charity. They gained, the younger students gained. Right? It's a tremendous thing. So there are different ways. It could be physical, i.e. money, if they need money help. It could be, let's say, they have medical issues. Could be taking them to the hospital, other acts of loving kindness, many things. Right? It can be words of encouragement. It doesn't necessarily have to be, specifically with money. So a person over here has to understand, what our obligations are in life, and what we have to do, and how high the obligation, how deep, what we have to do, and we do things on a daily basis. We got to think about what we do. We have to implement what we learn, even though life is hard. There's an evil inclination. The evil inclination never stops. Things pop into our mind that shouldn't be there. All kinds of things. The evil inclination makes it very hard. Makes it very, very hard. So we're here to toil. We're here to struggle. No pain, no gain. Right? Totally no pain, no gain over here. Got to work hard. That's what life is. Does it mean everything's going to go my way? Not at all. Not at all. And I've said many times, and we'll keep repeating the same thing. And that is, people think they're going to change their lives. They're going to be, ultra-Orthodox Jews, converts, Noahites, whatever it's going to be. And they think God's going to, lay out the red carpet. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Now that you're closer to the king, now you have a greater understanding. Well, guess what? Now the stakes are a lot different. See, it'd be so easy. All I have to do is believe in someone and say, wow, he came for my sins. He did this, he did that. That takes no responsibility. Zero responsibility. And I'll throw that in the garbage 100 times out of 100 because I'd rather get judged more harshly than knowing, and know that my actions matter. That know my thoughts matter. That's what's important. Not pass the buck. Pass the buck's easy. I'll blame it on him. I don't have to do anything. It's all about what he did. Very good. So then what? I don't have to do anything. Does that make life worthwhile? I don't know. Doesn't seem to make life worthwhile. Doesn't mean my actions matter at all. Zero. Right? But what does God also want to see? When a person can be struggling with many things, as I mentioned last night, in Pirkei Avos, what's the mantra? Whatever a person's going through, the mantra is, God, you're the one in charge. I am nothing over here. You're the one who put me in the situation, or maybe I put myself in the situation. Regardless, you're the only one who can take me out. I have perfect faith. You're going to help me, however it comes. You're the one in charge. Now, what could happen? What could happen? A person could go through a spiral for a long time. Could be months, could be years, could be many, many years. And then all of a sudden, something, light bulb goes off in God's mind, says, okay, now I'm going to help them. Now I'm going to open worlds. I'm going to totally open worlds in many different ways, spiritually, physically, all kinds of things. Why does God do that? Why all of a sudden the light bulb go off, so to speak? Light bulb goes off because what does God see? God sees self-sacrifice. He sees absolute self-sacrifice. He sees what someone's willing to put themselves on the line for Torah. Now, does that mean it's going to be easy? Oh, no. Does not mean it's going to be easy by any stretch. And it may be unbelievably painful. And the Talmud says, Lafit Tzara Agra. According to the amount of pain a person can measure it with, the amount they're going to gain. So if it's easy, you get rewards. You won't just get as much. But if it's hard and you overcome it, you surpass it, rewards unbelievable. And a person's not the same person if it's so easy. But you're going to say, come on, life's kind of hard, getting squeezed this way, that way, 20 different ways, like Plastic Man, getting thrown all over the place, okay? That very well could happen. But guess what? God can change things keherevayim. The blink of an eyelash. Overnight. Seen it in my own life. Number of times. Overnight. You know what they say? When you least expect it, that's when it happens. It's when it happens. Right? So I went on Odyssey for 17 years. Sometimes it's better. Sometimes it was worse. But at some point, I said, okay, this happened. Everything's good. Year and a half later, boom. Bottom falls up. Okay? Gotta try this, try that. No. Now, you're struggling again. So what happens? Okay, you find something, not the greatest thing, not so easy, blah, blah, blah. So what happens 11 months later? God says, no, I'm going to take this away. Not only that, you're not getting any benefits. You can't collect unemployment. So I was like, what is it, some kind of joke? I'm like, are you kidding? What I did for 11 months. Learned in the morning, worked at night. Yeah, whatever. I was a zombie. and then all of a sudden it gets taken away. Okay. Right. So then what happened after that? What happened after that? My wife says, okay, you want to do this, you'll do it like a business. Get home from learning, you got to make blog posts, videos, this, that. I said, okay. I give myself a month, maximum. Maximum. What happened? I kept my ears and eyes open. And I said the following thing every day, 3 times a day. God, I don't know why I had to go through this. Probably my own fault. Whatever it is, you are 100% in charge. You're in charge, right? This is by the blessing of Parnosa, right? In the Shemona Esrei, right? Praying for life. I said, okay. I would say it's part of a, blessing at the end, right? Not as part of a blessing, but, being my thoughts at the end, we can add anything. I said, okay, you're the one in charge. Now, deep in my mind, I said, okay, he's the one in charge. He can change anything at all, But if you have a track record for 13 years, the odds something's going to change overnight are probably pretty slim. And I play the odds. I'm very big into statistics. So, if I would have put all the money I don't have down, I would have said, never going to happen. Never. Maybe I'll get 1 student, maybe I'll get 2, maybe this, maybe that. I'm going to have to find something else in the meantime. Okay. I'm going to put my best foot forward. You're the one in charge. That was my mantra. And I said, I don't know what I do to deserve. There's probably a million different things. You should have mercy. I did what I didn't want to do. So you're in charge. You make it work however you're going to make it work. And then what happened? What happened within less than 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Things exploded. Exploded overnight. Not according to nature at all. Not according to nature. Within 2 months, 2.5 months, like 15 new students. Never happened. In 13 years, never happened. Totally exploded. Okay, I put my best foot forward. I was doing my Q&As, I was doing my Parsha thing because I didn't have time to do it before. Whatever. Got a little more exposure. But is that the equivalent of what happened? Not even close. If I would have put all my money I don't have down, I would have said I would have made millions. Millions. I would have said never going to happen. Never. Maybe I'll get 1 student, maybe a couple, maybe this, maybe that. I'll have to find something else. There's no way. My business is not, still in the process. Whatever. Okay. If that's what I have to do, I'll do it. Not that I want to, but okay. Whatever it takes. Overnight, instantaneously, no doing of my own. Wasn't like I said, okay, I'm going to take on this, I'm going to take on that. I didn't take on anything special, as far as I remember. But I said, okay, if this is what you want, this is what you want. But you're the one who's in charge, not me. So I'll put my best foot forward. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I'll keep my ears and eyes open. You want to tell me in 2.5 months that something's never happened in 13 years? 13 years I've been doing this. Never happened. How many students I get? 1, the most, maybe 5, maybe. And then maybe I lost some and some couldn't pay, and then whatever. Doesn't really matter. This is something above nature, totally above nature. So what? Okay, so I had to go through this, go through that, suffer this way, that way. So what changed? I don't know. I don't have an answer. The only thing I can say is my mantra changed. Totally changed. Not like I didn't say it before, but now I meant it. I meant it. I can't do anything without you. You're the one who's calling the shots, not me. Not me at all. Book of Leviticus says in duties are hard, you got to put your best foot forward. True. 100% you got to put your best foot forward. But is that a guarantee for success? Not at all. Not a guarantee. You got to do what you're good at. You don't change things, okay? Right? But at the same time, you got to put your best foot forward. Finished. That's what you got to do. Right? So I didn't say, well, life isn't fair. I said, what in the world's going on here? I'm doing my best. And I can tell you, over the last 17 years, thank God most of the trials have been in the pocket. God forbid, not with sickness, other things. I've been blessed in many other ways. Okay? And I told my Rebbe on Purim a number of years ago, I first came back. First winter, I was learning, back in the morning. And I told him, listen, you once told me a person doesn't have the ability to inherit both worlds. Right? Either a person's going to be a massive rabbinic scholar, but they're not going to have money. Or they're going to have money, but not be a massive rabbinic scholar. So I said, fine. So I said, I told him I earned like, 70 pages of Talmud and 2 different tractates, in 6 months, 5 months, whatever it was. So I told him, I said, if I can't have the blessing, of making a living and I'm going to struggle, fine. I'll take that on, but I want the blessing of Torah. I want the crown. I said, you give me the blessing of the crown of Torah. That's what I want. And things exploded after that. It's a different world in many ways. It doesn't always work out the way we think. It probably never works out the way we think. But why does God sometimes change his mind here and there? He might change his mind because he sees what's deep in a person's heart. He sees that a person's willing to give over whatever it takes. And he's not a faker. And he says, okay, I squeezed you long enough. Now I'm going to open up in different ways. Is that expected? Wasn't expected. Not at all. The joke, actually. I laughed. I told my wife, another one. I was like, what are you kidding? I said, no. I said, not at all. It exploded. It wasn't normal. So, I'm not going to get into God's head here, of why. But I think part of it has to do with the fact that a person has to really show real belief and real understanding, right? And meaning that you have to live what the Chovos HaLevavos says. As Rav Victor Miller said, you got to live what Duty Zahar says, right? Anyone who wants strength in this, read the gate of Bitachon, the gate of faith and belief in God. And Duty Zahar is one of the gates over there. Changed my life in so many different ways. It changes the way we think. But what do we see? We're not in control of almost nothing. We think we have this idea, that idea, the other idea. Guess what? It may go or may not go. Someone in the 1970s, I think it was in the 70s, someone invented a pet rock. If I would have put a rock together, put a bow on it, put it in a box, think anyone's going to buy it. Guy made a mint. Crazy things people make money from. We're not talking rocket scientists here. Then you got people that, work hard, great professions. They don't make as much. You'll tell me it's the way they speak. It's, it's customer service. It's this. It all doesn't matter. You know what matters? It's what God's calling the shots. He's calling the shots. And that's something that's crucial. We have to understand. And if we don't understand that, we're not going to get anywhere in life. Because we got to think, okay, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do the other thing. Right? I have to go out, there are many things. And then we say, what's our word? God forbid. Person never say that. Say, keeping all the mitzvahs is what you do. Family doesn't speak to me. Community doesn't want me. Anyone gives me a hard time. My rabbi screams at me all the time. Like, boy, it's so much fun, isn't it? It's unbelievable. What do I need it for? Some people say, you're right, I don't need it. I'm going to take the easy way out. I'm not talking about being a no-eye. They just leave everything. But if I understand how the world works, and I understand it's not about me, eventually it's going to turn. At some point, it's going to turn. A person's life is not always down. The Ramchal says that clear in Derech Hashem. It's not always down. We may think, okay, this happened, so this is perpetuated. It goes and spirals and this and that. Can happen. Not going to say not. But in the end, it's not always bad. It's not always bad. And then, I'll give an example. And I should have mentioned this in my video last week I made on the Parsha. Right? So when I lost this job, and the kicker of it was I couldn't get unemployment. I was only there 11 months. So that was like, okay, at least I have a little bit of time. And every time, it's right before Passover. Or right after Passover. It was right after Passover. Right? So now what? I can't collect unemployment. It's not going to be so easy over here. Okay. So how would most people, myself included, view such a thing? They're going to view such a thing and say, wow, that really looks bad. I'm not going to say I was making great money by any stretch. Right? It helped. Not going to say not. Definitely helped. Right? It was consistent or whatever, but still, how can a person look at it? They can say, wow, that's a bad break. What are you going to do now? It was my answer. I don't know. Let's see. So that was my mantra. Within 2 weeks, replace that salary. Plus. Within 2 weeks. Was that expected? Not at all. Not at all. According to logic, according to nature, let's say better, according to nature, never should have happened. Never should have happened. Right? The odds are zero. I'm not even going to give it a percentage. It's zero. Because it's never, ever happened. Ever. Never happened. So you're going to say, well, you were just lucky. Maybe I was. But why did things turn? That's the question. I'm not saying we should try and figure it out. Probably never going to understand. But you know what? Sometimes God says, okay, let's see what's really deep in the heart. Let's really see where the person's holding. Let's see what they really want. You really want it? Okay. I'm going to help you over here. And if he doesn't want to help, you won't do it. It's not going to happen. God wants to see self-sacrifice. Right? He wants to see self-sacrifice. And self-sacrifice means it's going to come at a price. It could come at a very severe price. The person may say, I don't want to give up that. I don't want to give up this. It's a severe price we may have to pay. But I would venture to say, knowing that life is worth living, even if it's hard, even if we get tossed around, knowing that my actions and my thoughts matter, people can still take fantasy. People can still, pass the buck. They can do that. Doesn't give life any meaning. Not at all. Right? So let me finish up what the Rebbe here says. He says, the Torah here does not say it came to pass after the death of the two sons of Aaron. God spoke to Moshe. What does it say? The Torah says God spoke to Moshe after the death of the two sons of Aaron. The opposite. Right? It says after the death of the two sons of Aaron, after, not before. Why? Because God himself included in his words, when he included the idea of the death of the two sons of Aaron, what's he telling the Jewish people? He's telling the Jewish people about, obviously, their death. And he's warning them. He's warning them with a tremendous warning over here. Not to go in anytime you want to the Holy of Holies. Right? That's the next verse. We'll see if we get there. Right? But you can't go into the Holy of Holies whenever you want. So the whole point is, that the Torah said after the death of the sons of Aaron, to show you can't go in whenever you want. Right? God's explaining. It's a warning. That's what he's telling you. So a person has to know that when a person learns something, they hear a story, let's say, of a great rabbi, whatever the case is, he says it has a benefit. There's a benefit. It affects our soul. It have a tremendously positive effect. Someone's going to say, come on, I'm learning these things I'm learning practical law. I'm going to learn the laws of poor. I'm going to learn the laws of Passover. What about other things? They're not necessarily my everyday life. Yeah, it doesn't matter. You know why? Because whatever I learn and it's practical has an effect. I hear a story about a great rabbi, it has an effect. Not just words in general, right? You're talking about someone's character traits. You're talking about someone who's got the ability to change who they are, to become great people. How can that not have an effect? You might say, I can never reach that level. I can never do this. Maybe. Maybe. That's why some people will say, reading these autobiographies, make a person feel like, these people are so great. I'll never come close to that. Why bother reading it? It's a waste of time. Or why bother telling stories of great rabbis. I'm never going to reach that. I'm never going to come close to that. So why bother? Don't waste the time. It's not going to have the positive effect. So my Rebbe says that I heard from my Rebbe, Moshe Schneider, blessed memory, that he says in the Book of Leviticus Chapter 18, verse 8, Moshe spoke to his father-in-law, everything that happened, everything God did, the Pharaoh in Egypt. All right, so what's the question? What's the obvious question? The obvious question is, didn't Yisro, didn't Jethro already know? He knew what happened. So why does Moshe tell him? He says, Moshe Rabbeinu comes. So we see in the verses, it's only depends on the one who tells it. One who's telling the story. You have to know how to tell stories also. And he says, when Yisro heard from the words from the mouth of Moshe Rabbeinu, he understood in a different way. Totally different way. And he said that's the fundamental principle in order, in the essence of how a person tells over a story. It's dependent on the person telling the story. It's dependent on how they give it over. Because the person can tell the same story or a similar thing, and two people can say the same thing. One person gets to listen to the other. It doesn't go in. Imagine someone gets up to speak. Rabbi gets up to speak Friday night, speaks in front of his in front of his congregation, and he says, okay, the Torah portion this week, is going to be Parshas Vayakil. And Parshas Vayakil tells us, all about the boards and the loops and the class. They get tired as they're telling it. There's no emotion. There's no fire, right? So to speak. Now, I'm not saying the person has to yell and scream, right? We're not going that far. But a person has to know how to give over. If a person knows how to give over in a proper way, then it's going to be listened to in a specific way. If a person, let's say, they give over something, we'll make it easy. They give over something, they don't really understand it. And if they don't really understand it, then whoever they give it over to is also not going to understand it. Right? Someone told me a number of years ago, someone went to a class of somebody, saw him in person, and this person never should have been teaching. Thank God he's not teaching now. And, just totally confused about his own stuff. So I said, okay, tell me how it goes. I didn't say anything. So let's see what he comes out with. Person texts me after the class. And he tells me, I went to this class and I came out more confused than I went in. Now, what does that tell you? It tells you clear as day the person didn't know what they were talking about. Because if they didn't know what they're talking about, then it's not clear. If it's not clear, you don't know how to give it over. You're not going to understand it. So it depends on the person, it depends on the person, what they know, how much they know, and really the most important thing, how they give it over. I mean, you could have people give over messages not worth anything, but they're very charismatic. They say all kinds of things. They jump up and down, this, that, very entertaining. But in Kaufman's language, it's all fluff. It's all fluff. And unfortunately, that's what sells today. My wife's quote unquote, Rabbi Friday night from the pulpit would quote, Harav Agon Atzadik, the righteous Dennis the Menace. I would have quoted Calvin and Hobbes. I would have quoted the Wizard of Id. Maybe even Doonesbury. Maybe. Quotes Dennis the Menace. In front of the congregation, I can understand. Okay, you want to make a point. You're going to, maybe quote Charlie Brown. You quote, another comic strip, whatever. They're not going to say, it's necessary, the end of the world. The person, wants to make a specific point or whatever. Right? But, when you hear something like that in general, probably most of other stuff that's going to come along, probably not, not that worthwhile. Probably filled with a lot of fluff. Maybe, I remember, a conservative rabbi in my parents' synagogue would say, I was reading the New York Times. Yeah, what does that have to do with the parasha? What does that have to do with Torah? I remember I asked, one of the people in charge, the synagogue, whatever, I was a kid. I was like, what does that have to do with anything? What does that, so let's say better. What does that have to do with Torah? It's like, oh no, he's making a very deep point. Now, he could have been lying also. He's like, I have no idea. But I can't say that. I'm not going to say it. Right? So someone can also talk very intelligently and say nothing. It's just the person is more intelligent so they can use, higher language and different things. But bottom line is they don't say anything. They don't say anything worthwhile. Just gibberish in general. So what's the point in that? There is no point. Except there are people today who want to be entertained. They want to enjoy. They want to feel good. They want to feel good about their Judaism. They don't want to be told what to do. They don't want to be said this is bad or this is wrong. They want to be told everything is good. Whatever they do is good. Don't worry about it. It really doesn't matter. God's not going to zap you. It's okay. It's a certain lifestyle. Nah, what's the big deal? Be open-minded until your brains fall on the floor. Make everyone feel good. Right? Isn't that what Kushner did in his book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People? He had a son, tragically, died of progeria. Disease that, have a child in the body of an 80-year-old. Horrific thing. But what did he come out and say? I've looked into my deeds. I'm not such a bad person. It is my wife. Must be God doesn't run the world. Now again, nobody wants to go through such a thing. No one should ever have to go through such a thing. But that's the wrong conclusion because God's the one in charge. He's the one who runs the world. When you do the last 2 chapters of the book of Job, kind of a problem. Where God says, Job, were you there and I was playing with the Leviathan? No. Were you there and I took these birds and saved them from their parents and they were going to eat them up? No. Were you there this? No. So shut up, my language. What are you squawking about? You don't know anything I do. You don't have any clue. So he wrote a book, New York Times bestseller, because it made people feel good. Made them feel good. Why? Because it means I don't have to take responsibility for my actions. It means that whatever happens, doesn't really matter. And if it's bad, it's your bad luck. It's your bad luck. Things happen. Right? Get that t-shirt that says stuff happens. Stuff happens. It's your bad luck. See, what he did was, and again, I'm not judging what he went through. I'm judging what his conclusion was. Right? And his conclusion is antithetical to Torah. It's heresy. Right? Essentially, it's heresy, but he made people feel good to say that they're not responsible for their actions. Now, there is an answer, obviously. Now, you have to go to Kabbalah here, right? But, if a child has that type of disease, it's not the child's fault. You know why it's not the child's fault? Because they're not liable for anything. You're not bar bat mitzvah. He's younger. She's younger. So something else has to be going on. You have to come on to the soul, maybe reincarnation. That's why the soul comes back. It has to go through certain things in order to, reach its potential upstairs, all these different things. But it's not about punishment. It's not about punishment for the person. The soul has to go through it for whatever reason. Right? But it can't be punishment. Why not? Because punishment only comes after bar mitzvah. That's when a person becomes an adult according to Torah. So if the person's not an adult, there's only a couple conclusions. There are only a couple conclusions, right? We'll go with the worst conclusion. The worst heretical conclusion is, I don't know if it's the worst, but the heretical conclusion will be, well, guess what? Stuff happens, you're bad luck. God's not in control. That's the worst conclusion, right? That's pretty much the only other conclusion. Other than the soul came into this world, and we have to look at his body and soul together. Then you have to understand, how the soul comes in, what it's obligated in, what its purpose is, what the purpose of life is. Take a long time to explain this. right? But again, it has nothing to do with the body here. It has nothing to do with punishment. It can't be punishment because according to the Torah, punishment comes later. Unless there are other circumstances. Even if a child is younger, let's say you had a city of idolatry. You had a city of idolatry, right? The ones the Torah say you wipe out the whole city, men, women, children. What the children do? They don't know anything, but they're growing up to be idolaters. You wipe them out also. You got to say, but they didn't sin. Okay, sometimes there's collective punishment. God can mete out collective punishment. And that can happen even if they're not liable. Right? But in this case, if they're going to go in that path, you wipe them out. It's interesting. You only see one case according to the Torah. One case according to the Torah where you nip it in the bud, kill someone, at a very young age. And that is by the wayward son. By the wayward son, eats like a quarter pound of meat, a little bit of wine, drinks a little bit of wine. And between the ages 12 and 12 and a half, if he doesn't repent, parents are going to kill him. Now, seemingly, the rabbis learn out that parents have to have the same voice, have to have the same height, a lot of different things to make this law pretty much obsolete. It never happened, right? Or the Talmud gives another explanation, and that is that really this never happens. Why the Torah mentioned it? In order for you to learn it and to get merit, to get reward for learning it, right? But this is the only time that we know of that a person is going to, why don't you let him repent? Why don't you give an opportunity to repent? Why do we nip it in the bud? Because of what he's going to do in the future. He's got 6 months, maybe he'll repent. What's the problem? Problem is, since he got into all these bad habits, and now he wants to keep his bad habits, going to end up stealing from his parents. No, we're going to nip it in the bud. We don't see that by any other mitzvah. But because here, seemingly, we have a guarantee. Right? It's hard to understand, but seemingly, there's a guarantee what this kid's going to do. And since there's a guarantee, and he's not going to do tshuva, you wipe him out now. But again, probably never happened because a lot of details you won't be able to mete out over here. They won't be the same. Right? They won't be able to mete out the punishment anyway. But that's not really the point. Right? You see, there is such a case. There is such a case. Right? I don't know of any other case where someone's going to get wiped out for what they, for future. We don't care normally about the future. We care about what the person's doing right now. Who do we learn that out from? Yishmael. Because the Torah says, when he's dying of thirst, Hagar turns away. And the Torah says, Basher Usham, where he is now. The Medrash says, the angels tell God, kill him, wipe him out. Look at all the pain it's going to cause the Jewish people in the future. God says, okay, I'd love to. It's only one problem. So the angels say, what's the problem? So God says, is this child right now, is he liable? Is he obligated for doing bad things or not? No, he's not liable. If he's not liable, I can't kill him. Can't kill him. Doesn't matter what he's going to do in the future. God judges where a person's holding now, right? And that's a benefit to all of us, right? Because if we have greater potential, we have much greater potential, and God says, I'm going to zap you now because you're never going to reach that potential. That's a different issue. That's not going to happen in general. God's going to judge us every Rosh Hashanah where we're holding now. What we did during the year. What we've done in the past. Not about future. It's about right now. So that's kind of a consolation. Because even though we're going to get judged, Jews and non-Jews are going to get judged on Rosh Hashanah, and that's the only time during the year we want to get judged. We're going to get judged for what we did during the year. For what we did in the past. Right? Not for future. There is a story that, really goes against this, but, we'll tell the story anyway. It's a good story. It's a famous story with the Netziv. Rav Naftali Tzvi Berliner. He took over Volozhin, the yeshiva in Volozhin after Chaim of Volozhin. And he was a rambunctious kid. His parents got him a tutor, got him a rabbi to teach him, a teacher to teach him. And he'd play games, he'd run away, he'd do this, do that. The parents didn't know what to do. The parents were talking, and then, we have to get him an apprenticeship, something. This kid's not gonna be anything. At least, he should be able to make a living. Right? So the Netziv, hears this as a child. Now, again, you have to understand this is a story about a child. So it's a little bit hard to understand, as we're going to see. So the Netziv goes to sleep. Steve goes to sleep. He has a dream. He has a dream and he understands he's being judged in the heavenly court. Now, again, why is it hard to understand? He's a child. Children are not necessarily going to get judged. Right? But okay, he's a child over here. Fine. So what happens? So here's a Baskel, here's a heavenly voice. And the heavenly voice says, okay, bring out all the mitzvahs that he did. Right? So some white, a whole bunch of trainloads of white angels come out, some stronger, some weaker, depending how he did the mitzvahs. And there's a huge scale there. The scale goes way down. All the trains come, all the angels come out, and that's it. So he's feeling pretty confident. Then here's another Baskel. Here's another heavenly voice. Heavenly voice says, bring out all his transgressions. So he sees these black angels, trainloads of black angels, some stronger, some weaker. They jump on the other side, and he sees the white angels coming up. He's getting a little bit nervous. It's getting closer. It's getting closer. Black angels, look like they're going to, rip him to shreds. And he's still doing okay. Even with the last angels, he's still doing okay. With these last black angels. So he feels okay. The trains leave, and then he hears the following Baskel. He hears the following heavenly voice. Okay, bring out all the books he was supposed to write in his lifetime. Now, again, there are a lot of questions on this, but what comes out, this huge volume of the Emek HaShela, right? One of the books he wrote, Emek HaDavar, his commentary on Chumash, on the Torah, humongous volumes. And they're coming to the side of transgression. And then it seems like, I don't know how, like turn white, scared out of his wits. He's like, what are these books? What are these books over here? What's going on? So here's another heavenly voice. And the heavenly voice says, this is what your potential is. Your potential is you could have been so great. You could have written these books, but right now, they go on the side of transgression. Now again, it's hard to get judged by what a person may do in the future. Fine. That's a whole separate question, right? After that scale breaks, he wakes up. He wakes up in a sweat. And he runs to his parents. Like, Mom, Dad, whatever he called them. He's like, you bring my teacher tomorrow. I'm ready. I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to learn. Change his life. Change his life. Now, if we would have such a dream, I don't know, give it any credibility. Not dreams in general don't mean a whole lot. Right? Unless it's for a king or, I don't know, someone comes to you in a dream, wants to give you a message. Most dreams don't mean anything, right? Just about what I thought during the day, during the weeks. Could be something I ate that was spicy, any number of things. Not, 99% of dreams don't mean anything, right? This was a significant dream. And again, he was a child at the time, right? If you tell me it's over bar mitzvah, then I would understand better, right? But in either case, this was future potential. So I would venture to say, my opinion, but whatever it's worth, we don't want to hear that later. We want to be woken up now. As the Rambam says, the laws of repentance. The Rambam says that we're given a whole month of Elul for introspection. We hear the shofar every day except on Shabbos, to wake us up because we're asleep during the year. The whole year we're asleep. And now we're going to refocus, re-energize, all this. Why are we asleep? Why aren't we excited about mitzvahs, right? What we spoke about before. Why aren't we running up and jumping up and down, kissing the ground, saying, thank God I'm learning Torah. Thank God I came out of paganism. Thank God I saw the truth. And what's the answer? Everyone knows my answer, because we get beaten down in life, and life is hard. Okay, life is hard, true. But the mantra has to be, God, whatever happens, you are the one in charge. I control nothing. I control absolutely nothing. You're the one in charge. That has to be the mantra, especially today. Because we live in an upside down world, such an upside down world, we have no idea. We have no idea what the next second's going to bring. The next minute's going to bring. We have no idea. My Rebbe's told me this many, many times. He goes, forget about politics, forget about this. Your obligation is to sit and learn. That's it. Forget about everything else. Forget about it. Your obligation is to keep what God says, no matter what, even if it's hard. You think going through an odyssey of 17 years is easy? Not easy. Not easy at all. You know, I've seen miracles. I don't think there's any question, right? Especially with marrying off my kids. That there's nothing to talk about. You know, then I'm going to speak about, you know, a couple of weeks on Shabbos. You know, after my daughter gets married, you know, it's Hashem. You know, it's unbelievable divine providence. So many different ways. I've spoken about it. So plenty to be thankful for. So much to be thankful for. Right? You want everything? You want everything on a silver platter? It doesn't work that way. It doesn't. And we may struggle. We may suffer. We may think, you know, I mentioned, I was just telling someone earlier, you know, someone came into my Rebbe synagogue last week, the end of last week, you know, it was collecting money, you know, for one of his kids got married. He said, I just married off. This is my third child I'm marrying off in 3 months. 3 months marrying off a child. Hard enough marrying off one child. I mean, I'm not saying, you know, the expenses are, you know, so exorbitant, depends what it is, but three kids in 3 months, that's, yeah, that's not easy. Not easy by any stretch. But you know what? Something's going to give and push and shove and whatever. He's going to be able to do it somehow. May not look pretty. He may just barely get to the finish line, if that. You know, but the miracle is, as the Satmar Rebbe said, of blessed memory, the greatest miracle is not the 6-day war. He said the greatest miracle is how Jews in Israel, ultra-Orthodox Jews, marry off their kids. It's a miracle. I was telling someone Friday night, he's got all these girls, just had a boy, 6-year difference between boys. So I told him, I said, listen, you can take me as an example. I don't have so much money, you know, great families my kids married into. Yeah, you can say, well, it's luck, but it can happen. It can happen, right? To get along with the other side, it's a bonus, tremendous bonus. Right? I was telling someone earlier, you know, that my daughter got engaged someone I hadn't seen in a while, and he knew the other side. So, oh, so beautiful, what a nice family, this, that. That's worth everything. What, you want all the money up front? You want everything up front to the last dime and everything's good? Come on. Doesn't always work that way. Right? Many ways it doesn't work that way. People put dimes together, they marry off the kids, however they do it. It's miraculous. I don't think there's any question. I got a friend of mine I learned with, marrying off his third child after Passover. Right? After Lag BaOmer, I think. Or before Shavuot or something like that. You know, he doesn't have any money. Never doesn't have any money. People help him, this, that. Now he did it. He did it. He looks good. He didn't sell any body parts. So people tell me, they say, hey, you know, some people claim the liver grows back. They say, you try it first. I said, yeah, I'll try it first and see. And if it didn't work, well, you know, that's it. You know, it's a miracle. I don't think there's any question. I don't think there's any question. And can God change anything? You know, can he change anything at any given time? He can. He can make it easy. He can make it hard. But I think things change a lot easier and a lot quicker when someone really believes in the mantra. And they say it, and they say it again, they say it a third time, and they really put it in their heart. Everything happens for a reason. I may not understand it. You're the one in charge, and that's it. And there's nothing I can do. I'm going to do whatever I need to do, and you're going to take me out of this one way or another. Even if I did something egregious, could very well be. Can I change it? I can put my best foot forward. Does that guarantee? No. Doesn't guarantee anything. But the Holy Bible says that's what you got to do. But God wants something here. What does he want? He wants, oh, you really believe in this? You really want to do this? Put up or shut up. Let's see. You going to run it like a business? Show me. Show me the self-sacrifice. Show me. And it happens. Now, is that the reason? Again, speculation. Speculation. But that's the only thing I know that I did any differently. You know, when a person's down, they pray a lot differently. A lot differently. So we have to realize our equilibrium can change in a split second. Just because things are good today or bad today doesn't mean they can't change the opposite tomorrow, in an hour, in a second. It can happen. But see, this is the generation right before the Messiah. What is the biggest thing, as Real Tauber, blessed memory, said? What's going to be the most important thing we have to work on, when in the generation before the Messiah comes? And that's going to be Emunah B'Tach. Working on our faith and belief in God. That's where it's going to be. Nothing more, nothing less. We may see things, don't make sense. And things that are horrific in different ways. I'm not even going to mention, I'm going to open my mouth. What horrific things could happen. Nobody wants them. Nobody wants them for anyone else. At the same time, this generation, the richest generation in the history of man, thinks everything happens by them. Right? It's the work of my hands did everything, not the work of your hands. You put your best foot forward. Does that guarantee success? No. But that's what you're obligated to do. That's our obligation. But if we don't have that mantra, right? If we don't have that mantra, not going to happen. Or it'll happen much later, or who knows? God can change anything at any time. And again, you're going to say, come on, that's for a previous generation. That's thousands of years ago. No. People have seen it in their own lives. Making weddings, no question. No question. Many, many stories. Be here till tomorrow. Right? Telling different stories. Miracles. There's no other way to explain it. You say, wow, that's an interesting coincidence. No. The odds of something like certain things happening are very slim, if not zero. They should never happen. So why does it happen? Because they're forgetting the big X factor. The big X factor is God himself. Right? And, and then many times we sit there and worry, and we worry, which that's what we do. Got bills to pay, other things. No one knows where things are coming from. Who knows what? In the end, it works itself out. May not be pretty, but eventually it works itself out somehow. So in the end, what do we say? What do we say? You give a wink to God and you say, see, I knew you were there all the time. I knew you were there. So where's your faith? Got to have faith. Where's your faith? We have to work on it. What did God want in the generation? The generation came out of Egypt. God gave the manna, double portion on Friday. Manna was gone. What's going to be the next day? Oh, mother hubbard, ain't nothing in the cupboard. What's going to be? God wanted them to flex their emunah muscles, their belief in him muscles. That's what he wanted. And they failed at a certain level. They didn't think they were on that level. Right? God, had they reached a certain level, they would have gone into the promised land, no problem. They didn't reach that level. They didn't reach, a certain level. So they forgot. They didn't put it into action. Or they thought, as we mentioned, that they're not on that level. But obviously God thought they were. But not only that, as we mentioned before, person never put in a situation they can't handle. Even if we think we can't handle. Even if it's hard, it's difficult, and all these other things. We can get through. It is possible. Person could go through a trauma, could have to go through therapy in order to get over it. Torah's not a quick fix. It's not a quick fix. But it can change the way we think. It can change the way we understand things. And if we as I always say, if we understand how things work, that's already 95% of the game. Now I have to put it into practice. That's a whole different thing. It's a lot more difficult. But I have to get the message. If I don't get the message, I'm in trouble. Right? Totally in trouble. Right? Someone here says, if rabbis are angels, you have no choice. What about simple people? We also have choice. Us simple people, I include myself. We're all simple people in different ways. We also have free choice. I want to eat something, I don't. I want to watch something, I don't. No one's putting a gun to our heads. See, but the greater the person, the greater the evil inclination also. Different levels. So something, we have to work on as well. Free choice, if you read the book Derech Hashem, the way of God by the Ramchal. So what does he say? He says that free will is limited. It's limited. I'm not in control who my parents are. I'm not in control who my siblings are. Not in control of socioeconomic situation. Mishnah Perkei Avos says, it says in Ethics of our fathers, born against our will. We're die against our will. It's the way it is. We're not in control. So, but we have free choice. Someone doesn't want to listen, they can click me off. Someone who wants to be a troll, they can be a troll. People have free choice. Right? The greater the person, he also has free choice. He's also got a choice to make at his level, at her level. Choice is going to be different than other people because they're holding in a different plane. What for us wouldn't necessarily be so bad. For them, they might be liable for death penalty, depending on what it is. So we mentioned before, the closer you are to the king, the worse it is. Even by a minor infraction. Right? 100% by a minor infraction. So we do have free choice. Right? We do have free choice. Right? Even if God knows what we're going to do next, it doesn't take away our free choice. And I grew up in the day before PowerPoint presentation. Right? Before PowerPoint presentations. So what happened? There were film strips. What was a film strip? Film strip was some goofy narrator says something, there's a slide, you hear ding, next slide, ding, next slide, ding, a whole bunch of dings. So you got the beginning of the film strip, the end of the film strip. Now I have to make a distinction here. If it's talking about God himself, doesn't God know what's going to be the beginning and the end of that film strip? Yeah. He knows what we're going to do, what we're going to say, all these things. Does that mean we don't have free choice? We have free choice. We're not programmed. We make the choice. What we see, what comes in front of us, that we might not have a choice in. But it doesn't matter. We do have free choice. No one's saying we don't have free choice. Free choice, though, is limited. Right? It's limited over here. Even if he knows what happens next. So what? Well, what does that have to do with me? What does that have to do with what I'm going to do right now? Nothing. Doesn't have anything to do with anything. Right? Zero. Question is, okay, I have to make that choice. I have to do it. No one's putting a gun to my head to do it. No one's trying to convince me to do it or not. I have that free choice. I absolutely have that free choice. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. So no other questions. I'm going to stop there. I'm pretty sure I'm doing Tanakh talk at 12:30 Eastern time, 7:30 Israel time. And then Noahide Nations after that, 2:30 Eastern time, 9:30 Eastern time on Noahide Laws. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Michael Chaim Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, or you can send me an email, Rabbi Chaim Kaufman at